Hello, I'm John Stamps. I'm a lead information developer at BMC Software. This video series contains the most practical advice that I could ever give you about installation. I'm going to show you how to dramatically reduce the time it takes to install CLM by installing the cloud products in parallel. We're going to install the small deployment across 11 VMs in about 5 to 7 hours. By default, BMC designed the CLM installer to be quite robust. If the installer or a target host crashes, the installer is intelligent enough to remember the last state you were in. In addition, to keep you from shooting yourself in the foot, the installer forces you to install the CLM products in a very strict sequence of product dependencies. So number one, nearly the entire CLM stack depends upon the AR system server, so it begins there first. Number two, after you finish installing the AR system server, the installer loads the next product in the sequence, that is the mid-tier. And number three, after the mid-tier is finished, then it loads HM Core Web Services. And then after it's finished, then it loads BSA, and then so on. There's really only one problem with the default installation procedure. It can take you 2 to 3 days to install the entire CLM stack for the small deployment. So here is one of BMC's best kept secrets. You can turn off the dependencies in the installer. Instead of installing the small deployment in a strict sequence, one product after another, you can install products in parallel. There are a few caveats, however. You cannot install all CLM products in parallel. There are still some strict dependencies in the CLM stack. And most important of all, you have to know what you're doing. You can install most of the AR system and BladeLogic components pretty much at the same time, but you cannot finish the BladeLogic installation until you finish the AR system installation first. Here are some rules of thumb that you should not ignore before you start installation. Make sure that you fulfill all the prerequisites and the system requirements on your host and your target VMs. For example, for Linux, install every single one of the 32-bit and 64-bit packages we tell you to install. On Windows, use gpedit and regedit to update the terminal services configurations. Make sure that the installer host can connect to the target hosts, and that the target host in turn can connect back to the installer host. Take every snapshot or backup when you're prompted by the installer. Trust me on this. And finally, fill out the planning spreadsheet. You might need some help from your database admin to get that information. We carefully documented every single prompt in the installer. When you're running through the installer, you don't want to make any guesses about what you're putting into the installer fields. You must start the installer from the command line and quote unquote release the dependencies. That is, what you're doing is you're turning off the dependencies. So number one, from the command line, set release dependencies to true. And then continue with the installation like you normally would. We're going to select the new deployment and small deployment options, and then enter the target hosts for the small deployment. This is a great place to stop this first video and catch our breath. In the next video, we're going to show you how to start the installer from the command line. And then we're going to install the following products in the control tier: the AR system server, the mid-tier, BMC Server Automation, BMC Atrium Orchestrator, and Atrium Core Web Registry components. Thank you very much.